Welcome back to CIA Declassified. Imagine a landscape where the earth itself is a fortress. You are standing in the Zagros Mountains, thousands of feet above the Mesopotamian plains. The air here is sharp, tasting of cedar and ancient dust, so thin it makes your lungs ache with every step. To the east lies the imperial state of Iran. To the west, the iron-fisted regimes of Iraq. This is the stage for KULARK. In the very early 1970s, this wasn't just a border. It was a front line in a shadow war where the currency was ammunition and the stakes were the survival of an entire people. You are a field officer, moving through the mountain redabouts, meeting with the Peshmerga, literally those who face death. The setting is one of rugged, primitive isolation juxtaposed with high-stakes modern espionage. You sit in a cave lit by a single kerosene lamp, the walls covered in topographical maps marked with operational zones. Outside, the shadows of the peaks stretch like long fingers across the valleys. This is the era of the Nixon Doctrine, where the CIA seeks to bleed its enemies through proxies rather than boots. The silence of the mountains is deceptive. It is filled with the static of shortwave radios and the hushed planning of a rebellion that is being financed by Langley but controlled by the whims of the Shah. Every mule train carrying crates of non-attributable Soviet bloc rifles is a tether to a promise that is already fraying at the edges. The crunch of frozen scree under your boots is the only sound as you navigate the Devil's Staircase, a vertical path where one wrong move means a 1,000-foot plunge into the limestone abyss. You are surrounded by men who wear the mountains like a second skin, their faces etched with the same harsh geometry as the cliffs around them. In this theater, the theater of the vertical, every supply drop is a miracle of physics, and every radio check is a gamble against the Iraqi direction-finding units lurking in the valley. You are breathing air that hasn't touched the lowlands in 1,000 years, witnessing a war where the front line is a goat path and the headquarters is a cave dripping with glacial melt. Here, the global chess match between East and West is played out in the desperate, gasping breaths of fighters who believe they are earning a country, while you know they are merely buying time for a superpower. You feel the weight of the human terrain here, the fierce tribal loyalty of the Kurds that has survived centuries of repression, but you also feel the clinical chill of the policy you represent. In the safe houses of Tehran and the hidden camps of Iraqi Kurdistan, the talk is of autonomy and liberation. Yet, back in DC, the internal memos describe the Kurds as a card to be played. You are navigating a world where trust is a liability and geography is destiny. The shadow of the peak isn't just a metaphor. It is the physical reality of living in a place where the sun sets early and the night belongs to those with the best night vision optics and the coldest hearts. The atmosphere is heavy with the scent of unwashed wool, gunpowder, and the bitter tea favored by the guerrilla commanders. There is a specific kind of tension in a KULARK meeting, a mixture of desperate hope from the Kurds and the practiced, detached observation of the agency men. You watch Mulla Mustafa Barzani, a man who has spent more years in the mountains than in a bed, and you realize that to him, this is a holy war for a homeland. To the men in suits in Langley, it is a structural stress test for the Iraqi government. The mountains don't care about your politics, but they remember your betrayals. As the wind howls outside, you understand that in this altitude, a single slip on the ice is as fatal as a bullet, and the agency is currently walking on a very thin ledge. This is KULARK. Why the name? Within the Directorate of Operations, KULARK utilized the KU diagraph, which was the specific designation for the Central Intelligence Agency itself as a functional area. The LARK suffix was a randomly assigned cryptonym from a list designed to provide zero clues about the nature of the operation. This was a mask of insignificance. It was an invention of policy, a long-term strategic directive to move from simple intelligence gathering to the active paramilitary support of a separatist movement to destabilize a Soviet-aligned neighbor. To calculate the exact moment a liberation movement becomes a line item in a liquidation cell, we must audit the declassified facts of the KULARK machine. KULARK was initiated in 1972 following a personal request from the Shah of Iran to President Nixon. The operation was managed by the CIA's Near East Division. It provided over $16 million in direct financial aid to the Kurdish rebels between 1972 and 1975. The policy utilized non-attributable ordnance, mostly of Soviet manufacture, to ensure plausible deniability. KULARK funded the Peshmerga army, which numbered approximately 100,000 fighters at its peak. The program utilized mule-back logistics to transport heavy equipment through the mountain passes. It provided the Kurds with anti-aircraft weaponry to counter the Iraqi Air Force. KULARK utilized secure satellite links to communicate between mountain safe houses and Tehran. The system tracked the oil production spikes in Iraq to coordinate attacks on refineries. It utilized psychological profiling of the Iraqi leadership to identify internal factions. KULARK was active during the Algiers Accord negotiations. The program utilized shortwave radio broadcasts to coordinate guerrilla movements in real time. It tracked the Soviet military advisors present in Baghdad. KULARK utilized dead drops in the bazaars of Erbil for sensitive intelligence swaps. The program identified the secret oil pipelines used by Iraq to bypass Kurdish-held territory. It utilized voice stress analysis on intercepted Iraqi military communications. KULARK allowed for the digital mapping of the mountainous border zones. The system utilized heat-seeking sensors, primitive versions, to track Iraqi troop movements at night. It reduced the Iraqi military's ability to focus on its southern borders by 30%. KULARK was utilized as a leverage point during the Cold War negotiations with Moscow. The program experimented with aerosol-based disruption to jam Iraqi radio signals. It utilized natural language processing, manual, to categorize dialect-specific intercepts. KULARK documented the water supply chains for Iraqi desert outpost. The system utilized remote seismic sensors to detect heavy tank movement in the valleys. KULARK was integrated into the SAVAK, Iranian intelligence, data sharing network. The pods of data collected were used to target Iraqi infrastructure during the 1974 offensive. The project used thermal shielding for Kurdish munitions depots hidden in caves. KULARK identified the supply vulnerabilities of the Iraqi 4th Mountain Division. The program utilized fake identity papers for Kurdish assets traveling through Western Europe. It tracked the paper trails of secret Stasi funding through Swiss accounts. KULARK utilized human intelligence to verify the location of Iraqi gas stockpiles. The software, analog at the time, mapped clan lineages to predict which tribes would join the rebellion. It identified double agents within the Kurdish Democratic Party. KULARK utilized pinhole camera technology and diplomatic bags crossing the border. The program used economic sabotage to devalue the Iraqi dinar in Kurdish regions. It identified the secret Hohenschönhausen-style interrogation centers in Baghdad, Stasi interrogation centers in Baghdad. KULARK utilized cryptographic ciphers based on ancient Kurdish poems to evade Soviet decryption. The project mapped the hidden salt caves used for storing emergency grain. It utilized signature analysis of Iraqi radar to find gaps for supply flights. KULARK documented the desertion rates of non-Ba'athist officers in the Iraqi army. The program utilized diversionary explosions to draw Iraqi forces away from the Iranian border. It identified hard target vulnerabilities in the Kirkuk oil fields. KULARK utilized social network mapping of the Kurdish to recruit technical experts. The system tracked seasonal snowmelt to predict when mountain passes would be navigable. It identified the chemical markers in Iraqi fuel supplies to track logistics chains. KULARK utilized false flag operations to create friction between Iraq and Syria. The program identified the underground radio transmitters used by the Iraqi opposition. It utilized behavioral modeling to predict when the Barzani would demand more autonomy. KULARK mapped the microwave relay towers between Baghdad and Mosul. The system identified vulnerable points in the Iraqi government's internal telex network. It utilized propaganda leaflets dropped by unknown aircraft over Iraqi cities. KULARK tracked the smallpox vaccination records to identify troop rotations in the north. The program utilized bioluminescent markers to mark dead drop locations in the dark. It identified landing strips in the mountains capable of supporting C-130s. KULARK was terminated within hours of the Algiers Accord signing in 1975. A quote from Henry Kissinger reflecting on the abandonment of the Kurds: "Covert action should not be confused with missionary work." Declassified internal CIA briefing dated 1973, "We are not here to win a war for the Kurds. We are here to provide the Shah with a buffer." And this is a quote from one of the Kurds: "In the mountains, the wind tells the truth, but the diplomats and Tehran speak only in lies." A declassified NSC memorandum on Middle East proxy policy: "The Kurdish asset is a disposable component of a regional containment strategy." A declassified intelligence assessment for the Director of Central Intelligence: "Our silence during the Iraqi offensive is a prerequisite for Iranian cooperation on the Shat al-Arab." A declassified internal Near East Division dispatch: "Barzani's expectations for a permanent U.S. commitment are a fantasy we have no intention of fulfilling." And then a declassified transition protocol: "The withdrawal of technical support must be immediate and total to satisfy the terms of the accord." End quote. Within the post-operational audit of KULARK, a staggering 84 pages regarding the end-stage transition are entirely blacked out. These redactions are enforced under Exemption B1 for national security. I suspect these pages detail the agency's direct complicity in the silent withdrawal, the deliberate failure to inform the Kurds that the Shah had sold them out until the Iraqi tanks were already moving. I think that the redacted portions cover asset abandonment protocols, instructions to field officers to destroy all evidence of U.S. involvement, even if it meant leaving their Kurdish counterparts to face execution. The redactions likely hide the post-1975 liaison list, names of Kurdish traitors who were paid by the agency to ensure the rebellion collapsed quickly and quietly once the policy shifted. And I'm not the only one with theories. When trust is a weapon, the truth is always the first casualty. For instance, there's the oil for blood speculation. Some people claim that the CIA actually orchestrated the entire accord to ensure a global oil price hike, purposefully sacrificing the Kurds to stabilize the market. Then there's the ancient discovery theory. Some think that KULARK was a cover for a search for pre-Sumerian technology hidden in the caves, which was the real reason for the heavy paramilitary presence. Then there's the Barzani CIA micropact. Some believe the U.S. and Barzani had a secret stay-behind agreement that involves a hidden cache of nuclear-grade material currently buried somewhere in the Iraqi mountains. And then there's the engineered genocide theory. Some speculate that KULARK was intentionally sabotaged to allow the regime to clear out Kurds, creating a more stable, albeit brutal, regional partner for later Cold War maneuvers. Was KULARK a success? Tactically, it was a geopolitical meat grinder. By 1974, KULARK had successfully pinned down nearly two-thirds of the Iraqi military in the north, preventing them from exerting influence elsewhere in the region. It provided a laboratory of irregular warfare, allowing the agency to test how a high-altitude guerrilla force could withstand a conventional army equipped with Soviet armor. It allowed the U.S. to identify the tactical limits of Iraqi command and control. It turned the mountains into a denied area for Baghdad, proving that a well-supplied minority could hold the high ground indefinitely. Beyond the immediate battle outcomes, the tactical success was found in the professionalization of subversion. The agency didn't just give the Kurds rifles, it gave them a modern logistical spine. This tactical uplift allowed for them to transition from a tribal militia into a structured insurgency capable of large-scale coordinated maneuvers. By implementing distributed command nodes, the resilience of the rebellion was increased to the point where the Iraqi army, despite its superior numbers, was essentially bleeding out in the vertical. The victory for the CIA was the realization that a relatively small financial investment could neutralize a major regional military power, turning an entire nation's defense budget into a liability. This was tactical efficiency at its most ruthless, a 100-to-1 return on investment in the currency of chaos. Strategically, it was a masterclass in expediency. It achieved its primary goal. It gave the Shah of Iran the leverage he needed to force Iraq into a border treaty favorable to Tehran. It proved that the U.S. could turn off a rebellion as easily as a faucet, shifting from active support to total abandonment within 24 hours to suit a larger strategic realignment. This created a vacuum of trust that would haunt U.S.-Kurdish relations for decades. KULARK ensured that Iraq remained focused internally, reducing their ability to challenge Israeli or Western interests during a critical period of the Cold War. The deeper strategic victory, however, lay in the perfection of the disposable proxy doctrine. KULARK demonstrated that the U.S. could intervene in the domestic affairs of a hostile state without a single American life being lost by using the legitimate grievances of a local population as fuel for a Cold War fire. The operation pre-shaped the Middle East by weakening the regime and cementing the Iran-U.S. alliance of the 1970s. Even the abandonment itself was a strategic message to the world that American support is a commitment, not a commodity. This expedient realism allowed the agency to pivot away from a costly conflict the moment the geopolitical landscape shifted, demonstrating a strategic flexibility that redefined Cold War diplomacy. The Kurds were never the target. They were the ammunition. And in the eyes of the strategic planners at Langley, you don't mourn the bullets once the war is won. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, it led to quite a few, such as high-altitude signature management, which was perfected to allow supply flights to navigate the mountain peaks without triggering Iraqi radar. For humanity today, this logic underpins modern GPS navigation systems and high-altitude flight safety protocols for commercial aviation, while the military applies it to low probability of intercept communications and stealth drone technology used in mountainous border patrols. The intelligence community uses it for clandestine aerial insertion, allowing agents and equipment to be delivered into denied areas without leaving a traceable electronic footprint. Mountain terrain behavioral modeling was developed to predict guerrilla movement based on weather and topography. For humanity today, this breakthrough powers search and rescue operations and the prediction of avalanche risk in remote ski regions. The military utilizes it for vertical envelopment strategies, allowing commanders to predict where an insurgent force will bottleneck or hide based on topographical dead zones. And the intelligence community uses it for predictive surveillance, where satellite assets are prioritized on specific mountain passes before the enemy even begins to move. Asymmetric logistics optimization was refined to manage supply chains, moving from tech hubs to primitive last-mile delivery via human porters and animal transport. For humanity today, this is the foundational model for global disaster relief in regions with destroyed infrastructure. The military utilizes these techniques for expeditionary support, ensuring small isolated units can be sustained indefinitely without large vulnerable supply convoys. The intelligence community uses it for dark supply lines, where clandestine assets are kept operational through local, untraceable trade networks and unconventional transport methods. Cross-border proxy synchronization was created to manage a rebellion funded by one nation and fought in another. For humanity today, this complex logic governs international joint ventures and large-scale NGO operations in conflict zones. The military applies it to foreign and internal defense FID missions, where specialized troops synchronize local forces with theater objectives, and the intelligence community utilizes it for third-party intermediaries, allowing a superpower to influence a conflict through a regional partner while maintaining plausible deniability at home. The legacy of the Kurdish operation exists as a blueprint for the mobilization of stateless assets in the pursuit of temporary regional stability. It demonstrated that a guerrilla force could be surgically precise and tuned to disrupt a conventional military without ever requiring a formal declaration of hostilities. This era of the Mountain War marked a transition toward a more liquid form of global influence, where the borders and the mountains were merely a canvas for the broader interest of the superpowers. The most profound and chilling lesson of KULARK is the realization that a betrayal can be as meticulously engineered as a victory. We often view the 1975 collapse as a failure of policy, but when viewed through the lens of the invention of policy, it was a surgical extraction. The agency didn't just walk away. They performed a geopolitical vanishing act, leaving an entire people to face a vengeful regime with nothing but the empty crates of American ammunition and the hollow echoes of a quiet Channel promise. This operation proved that the most dangerous weapon in the CIA's arsenal isn't the gun, it's the exit strategy. It serves as a permanent, blood-stained reminder that when a superpower offers to hold your hand in the dark, they're often just checking your pulse for the moment it's time to let go. The most haunting legacy of the shadow of the peak is the realization that the betrayal of 1975 wasn't a failure, it was a plan. As the Shah and Saddam Hussein shook hands, the mountains of Kurdistan were already echoing with the sounds of a dream being systematically dismantled. It taught us how to walk away. In the mountains, the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. Never trust a map that was drawn by someone who doesn't have to live on it. Loyalty is a luxury that the geography of the Middle East rarely affords. And remember, the peaks are only shadows until the sun goes down. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we examine Rufus, the high-level cryptonym for rebel leadership in Central America. We'll look at the jungle camps, the secret airfields, and the reality of a war where the truth was buried in the mud. Join us next time for the heart of the hidden hand. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.